Hey guys, how you doing? Roundtree here, owner and founder of We Management Services, credit mastery instructor, author of 2 books, Credit is King, and full-time CEO, The Shit They Don't Tell You. But more importantly, it's not about me today. I'm actually here with a very special guest. I would like to say a partner, potential
100%.
partner.
100%. Yes.
And something that I'm truly and very excited about. And today's topic, we're going to be talking about creating a wealthy mindset. Also often, wealth is something that is not discussed especially in the Black community.
Correct.
And I think that it's kind of almost a taboo in some households to even talk about money. Whether it's credit, whether it's budgeting,
Yep.
savings,
Yep.
the dirty word life insurance.
Yep.
And
Right.
so all those things that we don't like to talk about. And so what I want to do, guys, is actually
That's right.
bring a special guest in who has a financial wellness company. They also do financial education. We have some similarities in our vision and some partnership and synergy that we're going to be doing. And so I thought it would be extremely beneficial for us to actually get together, talk about some of the things of how we just bottom line how our visions align.
Right.
And so what I want to do is introduce my good friend and partner, Wole. And so if you want to just kind of let everyone know who you are, what your company does, and why was it so important for you to get your company off the ground?
100%. Well, first, I can't say enough of how much of an honor it is to be sitting with you here today, Will.
Thank you.
Your work that you're doing inspires me and our team because we need people in the front lines who are trying to solve these big problems.
Thank
In
you.
our community, if we don't solve the problems and take talented young people to try to commit their lives to making our communities better, who's going to do it?
Definitely.
Right. And the fact that you've been at this game for a little while, educating your population on a regular basis, raising their level, is all part of this wealthy mindset that we're talking about. And
Appreciate that.
so my experience is such that having worked at the big banks for a couple of years, actually for more than a couple of years, 20 plus years, also in the insurance industry, I realized that some companies are not well suited to serve the needs of our communities. The traditional banking system is a branch-based system, and it requires individuals who have lots of deposits in the bank to be the ideal customer.
Correct.
And so many of us are just making it paycheck to paycheck. Money comes in, it goes out because we're handling our business. But as a result, the banks aren't set up in such a way to serve those customers well.
Correct.
And that's why the payday industry, pawn shop, all that stuff, that's become a $175 billion industry.
Wow.
That's growing 5 to 10% a year.
So now, not to cut you off, and it's
Yeah.
interesting you bring that up. So 2 points I want to make. One, the banks, not only are they not equipped to, serve us in the magnitude that the underserved and under economically served need to be
100%.
served,
Yeah.
they also don't equip their employees to even be able to educate the constituents on how to utilize their services properly. Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure all the banks want those individuals as customers.
Wow.
Right? So when was the last time a bank that you spent time with sent his or her employees to a public housing complex to encourage those individuals to open up bank accounts in their bank?
I haven't yet to meet one.
Correct. Right. And so I think the part of the issue is just the bank model is a branch-based model, and branches are expensive.
Very much.
And so the customer that they're looking for is someone who's leaving idle balances in the bank so they can lend those dollars out and make a nice return. And if you're somebody who doesn't have the luxury of having idle balances, then the bank is not in a good position to take care of your business.
Correct.
And as a result, they're not training their employees to handle that particular type of customer. 80% of the branches that have closed in this country in the last 10 years have been in low and moderate income communities.
Wow.
So as a result, folks are left, the employees aren't trained to handle that customer because they
Very
don't
much so.
really want that customer. And again, it's not a reflection of people running these organizations. It's just not in their business model
Correct.
to have large numbers of customers. And so what I've learned is if you deliver quality banking products to individuals digitally, and you can do it without relying on the branch infrastructure, you can actually provide a product that makes sense for somebody who fits our profile, who are the people we want to help, right?
Okay.
And you can do it in a way that's not exploitative. And you can give somebody an alternative to sitting hours in a check casher, getting their check cashed every other Friday whenever they
Correct.
get paid. So we created Mobility
Now,
Capital
before you get to
Finance.
that point,
Oh, sorry. Yes.
let's build up the suspense a little bit.
Yeah.
I saw you getting excited.
I get excited about these topics.
Definitely. So my second point to
Yeah.
your first
please.
statement is check cashing companies,
Yes.
payday loans,
Yes.
predatory lending
Yes.
institutions.
Yes.
Why are they popularized in medium and lower income neighborhoods? Obviously, primarily, minority and African American neighborhoods.
Right.
Why is that the case?
That's a great question. So if you've got bank branches moving away from low and moderate income communities, someone's got to fill the vacuum.
Correct.
Someone's got to fill the void. And the check cashers and the pawn shops are it's a complicated relationship, quite frankly. And it's easy to say, hey, they're terrible and we should get rid of them. I think that's absolutely true, but they're filling a market need, right? People need to get their check cashed.
Correct.
People need a little bit of cash to get them through from one paycheck to the next paycheck.
Correct.
So people need, if the car breaks down, how am I going to get the money to fix whatever it is so I can get to my job on Monday?
Correct.
And so with that, somebody said, this is a market opportunity, and I'm going to take advantage of it. And as a result, those institutions have popped up in our communities, and I can't remember the exact statistic, but the concept is there are more check cashers and pawn shops in this country than there are McDonald's, Burger King, and Starbucks combined. And that's because people need access to financial products.
So now, to that point, with check cashing companies and pawn shops, so if a certain demographic of individuals have a high default with banks,
right?
Obviously that default is going to be, exponentially through high interest and predatory lending.
Yeah.
How are they staying in business?
How are the pawn shops and payday lenders staying in business? Well, let's just look at the payday lenders. The payday lenders actually have a model, and there are lots of different shows, and we can provide a list of that to people and resource they can learn about it. But at its core, the payday lenders don't want you to pay them back.
Wow.
They have a model set up where they want to get you into a cycle of having to continually roll that loan over. If you're rolling that loan over 3 or 4 times, I think is the average. If once somebody starts getting a loan from a payday lender, I think the average rollover is like 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
And you're getting 400 to 1,000% on $500.
Hold on, repeat that statistic again.
The payday lenders will charge 400 to 1,000% on $400 or $500, and they want you to default, because if you roll that over 4 times over the course of 3 or 4 or 5 months, that institution's made a lot of money. I mean, think of your own investments. If you could make an investment and you got 400 to 1,000% return,
I would do it every day and twice on Sundays.
Exactly. And maybe even come back on Friday for a 3rd time.
Right.
So that is the business model. And when people don't have an alternative, if you live in a community and there's no bank that can say, well, you know what, Will, you might actually not have to pay 400%. I can give you something at 20% or 30%. But there's no alternative.
Correct.
So people get into a trap. And then once you get into that trap, it's hard to get out of that.
I totally agree. So that kind of segues to the next point of what are some other alternatives
Correct.
outside of the check cashing places, the payday loans, casinos.
Yeah.
Casinos will cash your check out here because they know statistically you'll end up gambling.
Right.
And so that money is going to come right back to the house.
Right.
And so before we get into, what your company actually can provide and deliver, this is why I talk about the importance of credit. And so with your, knowledge base and just being in a banking industry for, the amount of time you've been in, how important is understanding, or how powerful can one that has good credit be to help them prevent those type of pitfalls? And then I'll provide my own analysis of what I think.
Absolutely. So the credit score is an important component in terms of how the mainstream financial services industry evaluates people.
Correct.
Right. And it's from what is the amount of interest I'm going to charge you on that credit card, or how expensive your insurance is going to be, because they use the credit score as a proxy for risky behavior.
Now, I think a lot of people didn't know that.
So it's interesting. So I worked at a big insurance company in the 90s, as its symbol is a big red umbrella, and it was at that point that they started bringing in, at least at that company, your credit score as it relates to your auto insurance, because they use that as a proxy for risk. And I think that's just become a standard.
With everything. Employment, we talked about offline.
Well, that's exactly right. In the banking industry, if you want to get a job, even as a teller working in a branch, they're going to pull your credit score.
Right.
Because the credit score is a proxy for how responsible you are with money. Now, the problem is that in America, 35% of African Americans own their home, which means 65% of African Americans are renters.
Correct.
And there's nothing wrong with being a renter. But the problem is the most responsible renter for the biggest expense in the monthly budget is not allowed to use that payment to build their credit score. At all. And so there was an interesting study that was done in New York City. The comptroller for New York City did a study 2 years ago looking at individuals who lived in New York City public housing. And they took a subset, about 2,000 families, and said, what if the rent for that family was reported to the credit bureaus? What impact would that have on the credit score?
Tremendous.
That's exactly right. And they looked at individuals, they pulled a subset of those 2,000 who were thin to no credit file folks, and they found 20 to 30% of the people who are thin to no credit file people, if they had their rent payments reported to the credit bureaus, they would be 700 credit score better. 20 to 30% of the people would be 700 credit score better from having a thin to no credit file.
Right.
Can you just imagine? So I think there's this assumption that, well, you have no credit file, you got a thin credit file, you're not responsible. That's not the case. The reality is there are not good mechanisms in place to make sure that good behavior in our communities are reflected in the broader economic framework.
And it's interesting you talk about that, which is one of the reasons why I wrote my book, Credit is King, is to give people, basically give people a mind frame or a different narrative of understanding just what makes up a credit profile.
Right.
And so with that component being eliminated, there are other alternative, trade lines that can be reported on a credit report.
Correct.
But because we're not educated just on how important credit is, we overlook that. So let's talk about, and this kind of gets into what I was segueing to, credit cards.
Yep.
Okay. So now, when in a scenario where you don't have access to capital or money or having an emergency type of situation, I mean, what do you do when your brakes go out in your car? You don't have any money in your checking account.
Right.
That can be a very difficult situation. Do you want to go to the payday loan place and borrow money at 400 to 1,000% interest? Do you want to pawn your wedding ring or whatever the case is? And so I always tell people that credit is really a lifeline.
Right.
And so I would rather borrow a couple $100 on my credit card for that in case of emergency, my brakes at 17 to 20% versus 200 to 1,000%.
Right.
And because we've always just been taught to look at credit cards from a consumer standpoint, we haven't looked at it as it can really be almost kind of an emergency situation.
Completely. Right.
Or even for my entrepreneurs, credit is important, and having access to capital and credit is important to run your business.
Right.
Try running a business off just your cash. You will run out of cash and probably not be in business long.
That's true.
And so by bridging the gap, and that's the thing I love about what you guys' company does, where we come in from the credit component and giving people the front end education,
right,
and then segueing into what you guys do. Talk a little bit about your company and how it's breaking down barriers in the industry.
100%. As just before I do that, I just want to pick up on one of your points though around how you need to think about credit. And in your book, you talk about it's a journey, not a destination.
It really is.
And so you have to be vigilant. And once you get the aha that it's something I want to focus on or you want to focus on, it's like anything. You got to create the right habits. You got to stick with it. And there's not a magic bullet. One of the things, though, it's not quite a magic bullet. But so let me talk a little bit about our company and how we are addressing some of these issues. So we've basically created a mobile bank. Going back to the earlier conversation, we believe that because we're using technology and everyone's got a cell phone, and we're
even if they don't have a bank account.
Even if they don't have a bank account, they
probably
got
have
a cell phone.
That's
exactly right. Because that's the lifeline to
really
to being a part of the digital economy or digital world. But then with your cell phone, you can. So the name of the company is Mobility Capital Finance. We go by MocaFi. We're in the app wherever you get your apps. We're there. You download our app. Within a couple of minutes, you can have a MasterCard, prepaid MasterCard, on its way to you in the mail.
Okay.
And you immediately get into we create a mobile banking account for you, and you can get subcards, so you can, for savings, for your kids, you can get the cards. They don't have to do anything except just put your name on it, and the cards are free. And we don't have any minimum balance, no monthly fee, none of that, because we recognize that if you can get somebody an FDIC insured account with an account number and a routing number, you've already changed the game for a lot of people.
Oh, 100%. And you said something that's instrumental. What is the statistic of individuals who who are charged penalty fees or insufficient fees just due to their balance being below the minimum threshold of that bank? Because I think it's not necessarily that people are irresponsible financially.
Correct.
Sometimes you can't keep $100 in a bank account.
That's exactly
so how
right.
important has that been from you guys' study?
It's a very important component of the whole story. So banks, again, going back to the earlier part of the conversation, they're not necessarily geared towards an individual who has money coming in and money going out to pay their bills.
Wow.
And so what they do is they create fees to make
junk
up
fees.
For the loss. Junk fees
is what I call them.
That's 100%. It's exact. That's a great. I've not heard that phrase before. That's a great phrase. And the junk fees are, well, you need to have a minimum balance, or we're gonna charge you a fee. Or, hey, you went over $5 in terms of what was in your account. We're gonna charge you $35.
It's crazy.
Overdraft fees in the banking industry, $40 billion a year, $30 to $40 billion a year, just in overdraft fees. And that's really I'll call it a poor tax. That's a tax on poor people.
The one that are paying that in fees.
That's exactly right. Because oftentimes, if you have a nice balance in your account but you go over, we'll waive that fee because we know more money is coming, or we got other relationships with you where we're generating revenue from your account, and also ATM fees are another way of having a tax. So we're finding, and we've been very intentional in talking to the market and building our product in such a way that we make it free to people. And I'm excited, 2020 we'll be making even more enhancements to our product, including a free ATM network, as well as giving people free overdraft for small dollar amounts, so we don't have to rely on $35, $40 fees if you just need an extra $5 or $10.
Correct.
And we're going to base it, though, on your behaviors. If we know you, We say, hey, everybody needs a little couple extra bucks every
Definitely.
once in a while. So, so that's step one, where we have mobile banking. We can take pictures of your check, and you can have money deposited into your account. So all the things that people who are at some of the more traditional banks take for granted,
Correct.
we make available to folks for free or a very low cost if there is a fee.
Right.
Step two, which goes right into the heart of what you've been focused on and preaching about throughout your entire career, is this idea that says, and we just talked about it a little bit, taking rent payments and reporting those to the credit bureaus. So we can either, if you pay on our platform, or just show us that you paid your rent, and we validate that you're legitimate with the landlord, then we will report that to two of the credit bureaus,
Wow.
Equifax and TransUnion. And in addition,
Well, let me stop you with it right there.
Go ahead, please.
That's huge, because one, I think that a lot of Americans, one especially who may not be in the best credit situation,
Yep.
to not be able to have anything report can be detrimental to them long term.
Correct.
You know, we talked about offline how having bad credit is expensive.
Yes.
Brutally expensive, as
Yes.
I always say,
Yes.
because you're paying higher in interest, renting another apartment 3 times the deposit, all of
Right.
those things.
Right. That's right.
And to be able to have at least one thing reporting to where they know you have to pay this every month. And I
Right.
think that can open up so many doors for them to get better approvals
Right.
for other, from other lending institutions, because, by being able to have a monthly rental payment report from someone who either has a ghost credit file or someone who's coming out of high school,
Right.
turned 18,
Right.
Getting on your platform
Right.
and being able to establish credit immediately, that's a game changer.
Completely. And to that point, we're seeing people who we can take if you're a new renter, and you can start your rental payments on our platform, we'll report those. We can go back 2 years
Wow.
of rental payment and put that into your file and make that a part of your history. We're seeing some people get within a month of using our platform, and it's not true for everyone, so I want to make
Absolutely.
sure that we have the right disclaimers. People are seeing 50-point increases in their credit score.
I believe it.
For not changing their behavior, but getting credit for the credit that they deserve for being responsible
Absolutely.
people. So that is a game changer, and everyone should get, whether it's on our platform or anyplace else, everyone should do that. And we see that as a benefit of being our banking customer.
Okay.
Do direct deposit with you, free credit reporting. Over time, we think that if your credit score goes up and you want to be an entrepreneur,
It makes a world of difference.
a world of difference. If you want to start that, whatever it is, anyway, it makes a world of difference.
Definitely. So let's kind of backtrack a little
Please.
bit. I want to learn a little bit more about you
Okay.
and how you got into this space.
Okay.
So you come from the banking industry.
Yep.
What was your last title in the banks? What was your role?
I was one of the most senior African Americans at J.P. Morgan Chase.
Okay.
And my title was managing director.
Okay.
I spent from 2006 to 2015, so about 9 years there.
Okay.
I had 3 jobs, each managing director. One was ran treasury sales teams nationally,
Okay.
focused on all the products that treasurers need to move money and run big companies.
Okay.
I did that for the upper middle market space, and large corporates. I had customers like Walmart and Boeing.
So you handled a lot of money.
Handled a lot of money in the movement of money.
Right.
The second job I had was I ran commercial cards, so all credit card activity, non-consumer, on a global basis.
Okay.
So T&E cards, purchase cards that corporates use, like credit cards that corporates would use. And interestingly enough, single-use cards. So when people would book an Expedia trip and put their credit card in,
Correct.
the Expedia would actually get that credit card information. They'd get paid, hold your money, and then when it was time for you to check into the hotel, they would pay the hotel through our platform, through JP Morgan's platform. So anyway, so I did a lot of credit card stuff.
Okay.
And then my last job was I was the number 2 guy in the business bank for Chase.
Okay.
So small businesses, I was the head of sales and strategy. I had 12,000 bankers reporting to me in 5,600 branches. We had several million clients, and I was responsible for delivering all the bank's products and services to small businesses, which they defined as $0 to $20 million. And so thinking about how do we grow that business, how do we get more people on the platform. But the big aha for me in that role was moving individuals away from using the tellers to using the ATM machines and digital products, and found out the big insight for me was 80% of what you need to do in a branch
You can do right from your phone.
you can do right from your phone.
I rarely walk into a bank.
And so banks like you as a customer,
Right.
because they don't want you spending time working with the teller.
Because it cuts their expense down, less employees, less headache.
100%. I mean, you would be surprised, and you may know this, but banks do a good job. They time the time that tellers spend
I've
doing
seen it.
different.
I've seen it in different institutions.
different activities, and so that's so moving people out of the branch. And so, for me, it was a great aha that you can actually deliver a high quality product
And
to
never
people
go into a
and never
brick and
go
mortar.
into a brick and mortar. And talking a little bit about the profile of the consumer that we're talking about, going into a brick and mortar is not the right product for individuals. So that gave me a little bit of insight to using digital as a way to distribute products.
Okay. So now before we dive into that, I've gotten about 6 text messages, people asking me, why is it so damn hard to get a small business loan?
The reason it's so damn hard to get a small business loan is, from the bank's perspective, it takes the same amount of time to underwrite a $10,000 loan or a $15,000 loan as it would to do a $150,000 loan or a $250,000 loan. And the return on a $150,000 loan or $200,000 loan is a multiple versus a $10,000 loan. And so the banks have basically migrated to focusing on larger transactions because it's just much more efficient.
But then why will they back student loan, especially banks who've gotten into the private student loan sector or borrowing to the borrower, privatized loans?
Yeah.
How is that a benefit, especially with the default rates? I could imagine, 80+%?
80+% on student loans?
Yes.
So I'm not a student loan expert.
Okay.
So I don't want to profess that I've got all the insights on that particular topic. So I don't really have a good answer for you on that question. I would say, though, that student loans stick with people for a long period of time. Forever, right? Whereas a business loan may not. And so there's that component to keep in mind, as well as I think many banks have de-emphasized the student lending business and have turned it over to some of the more recent startup lenders and have allowed the electronic lenders to be big players in that. So I don't have as good an answer for you on that topic. I have to do a little more research. If you have me back, I'll have a better answer for you on that topic.
Doing this again.
But for small businesses, though, the effort to do that underwriting is such that banks are thinking about scarce resources. I think that is a huge opportunity for companies like ours who can mechanize that in such a way that we can take the underwriting costs out, particularly if we know the individual very well, that we can make those loans at the $5,000, $10,000 level.
And that's why I believe that the banking relationship is so important, which is why I tell all my small business owners and entrepreneurs, go open up a business bank account immediately. Because even though if a lot of money isn't going through the account, the bank wants the relationship because then, correct me if I'm wrong, they have data. And the data is very important to companies. Would that be
I think
true?
That's true. I do think that's absolutely true. I think banks, though, overall do a poor job of looking at all the data that they have about individuals. Banks should be the smartest people in the
You
room
would think so.
about someone's behavior, and they're only scratching the surface in terms of leveraging that data in the best interest of the customer. But, going back to the earlier part of the conversation, if 80% of the bank branches that have closed in this country have been low and moderate income communities, someone may not be able to find a bank branch to open
That
up
is
a
true.
business account. And that's an area that we're spending a little time thinking about. Can we create a similar mobile banking platform that's targeted to small businesses, similar to what we're doing with the individual, because the same issues apply? And one thing I would worry about, and my guess is it impacts some of the people that you're serving and talking to, is people are using their own personal accounts to handle
and run a
their
business, yes.
businesses, and that gets kind of dicey.
It does, from a tax standpoint.
Exactly.
Even just from an economic standpoint, now you're having to stretch that money even further.
Right.
Like, it's hard enough running your family.
Right.
Try running the business on
Right.
that same money.
Right.
That's extremely difficult.
And I think it's not only is it difficult, and I can say this as an entrepreneur, it can be dangerous.
Very much so.
Because you may be putting your family at risk.
Very much so.
Because something that's out of your control that's happening in your business may force you to look at the savings that you have set aside for your family. And you may look up and both things that you care
Right.
about are in jeopardy. So I think for all the reasons that you talked about, it's really important for people to come up with different accounts, but it can be a challenge. And we
Definitely.
think that's a big opportunity potentially over time. One interesting statistic for people who are thinking about starting businesses, that we've been doing some work with some small business commissioners across the country.
Correct.
And I got this. Let me read this. It's really exciting. Families of a self-employed head of household earns 2 times the average income of someone who works for somebody else.
Wow.
And the number is, if you are an entrepreneur head of household, you make $200,000 a year. And if you are someone who works for somebody else head of household, you make $100,000 a year.
Wow.
So that statistic, if that doesn't get you out of bed to say, how do I figure out how to become an entrepreneur, I'm not sure what will, but maybe this second statistic will get you there.
Okay.
A family that is led by an entrepreneur has 6 times the net worth of a family that is working, as head of household, is working for somebody else. And when I saw those statistics, and the difference is $400,000 versus $2.4 million.
Wow.
And I just learned these statistics recently. That's a big deal.
A huge difference. And it's almost kind of the premise of why I wrote my book,
Yeah.
Full-Time CEO, The Shit They Don't Tell You.
Yeah.
Because in business and being an entrepreneur, I've been on this journey 15 plus years.
Yeah.
One, you have to develop a certain level of discipline. You have a certain level of, ambition, drive. And for lack of better words, hustle
Yes.
than the average person who's
Yes.
probably only in corporate America.
Yes.
And so you become to understand that you have to have a certain level of leadership.
Yes.
And so, one, you're able to lead your family probably a little bit differently. But then not only that, you recognize opportunities differently and more openly. And so when you don't mind going out there and doing, because entrepreneurship can be on any level. I tell my barbers, you're an entrepreneur.
Oh, completely.
If you're an Uber driver, you're an entrepreneur.
Completely.
I know some people who work for Uber and Lyft. So you're bringing in more money because you are diversifying your skill set or your resources. And so I just think that that statistic is very interesting, and why I wholeheartedly think that everyone should have their plan B should always be entrepreneurship on some form. Whether even if you're selling something on eBay, you're an entrepreneur. And so I just think that because we're not taught this, we don't know that statistic can be beneficial. But those who actually get into entrepreneurship on any level, I could see why that could be the case and be true.
And not to get too historical about the whole thing, but I would suggest that prior to the civil rights movement,
Correct.
Black communities were forced to be great entrepreneurs.
100%.
And that was a time of great challenge because the racism was real, the segregation was real, the policies of the U.S. government were set up to really create the situation we find ourselves in today. But at the same time, I think about the fact that we have this company called Airbnb today, but
Right.
that's nothing more than the Green Book, right? The Green Book started in the 30s,
right.
and black people had to, before they got in a car to drive wherever, they had to look at this little Green Book
Right.
and figure out where they could stay
Right.
that was safe as they were going across the country. That's nothing more than Airbnb.
That is the exact same thing.
You know,
Different logos and
different
more
logo,
marketing.
more marketing.
So,
but
yeah.
we were Airbnb before
Right,
Airbnb was
right.
cool. At the same time, I think about my family comes from Charleston, West Virginia on my mother's side. And my great-grandfather bought a building, and he used that building to encourage individuals to start businesses.
Wow.
They had barbershops there, restaurants there. I was on the retail on the first floor, and they had offices on the second floor for lawyers, dance studios. It was all black-owned businesses. And what he did was he would invest in the entrepreneur and say, I'll buy you the equipment. I'll get you started, some working capital, and you can pay me back. And that became known as the Block. And in Charleston, West Virginia, that's an important part of that history. That's nothing more than WeWork.
Yeah.
You know, that's
That is
nothing
the
more than
exact same thing.
providing space. So we have an entrepreneur, and we can go through, you know.
It's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA.
It's in our DNA, I would have to say.
And the civil rights movement was a very important time for our community, and we're still fighting our civil rights in this country. And one of the aspirations that we had was to move into the corporate track. It was to get into the unions, and we've done that successfully.
Do you
But I
think it's done a disservice to the community?
I don't want to say it's done a disservice because I think it is an important part of how we as a community have evolved over the years. And I think about some of the great corporate leaders, black folks that have done a great job. I think about how important the unions have been in terms of helping black and brown communities sort of move out of poverty.
And even protecting their jobs.
And protecting their
Yeah,
jobs
definitely.
and getting the rights that
Absolutely.
workers deserve. But I do think it's only a part of the story. And I think we need to be as vigilant today about entrepreneurship as we have been about making sure that we have equal access to good union jobs and good corporate America jobs. Because, you know, as you described, you know friends who are Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. You got friends who are barbershop owners. Those are entrepreneurs. And I actually call them entreprenegros because I think that is what we're all about. And we need to be, and this is a really important topic for the 2020 election because I don't think it's enough to just talk about protecting workers. We've got to do that. But we got to also have a very vigilant plan about creating a very vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem because, look, for better or for worse, people hire people that they can relate to and that they know.
100%.
Right? And black communities, we've had higher unemployment rates, double the national average, triple in some places. I was listening to Martin Luther King's Other America speech the other day.
If no one has ever heard that speech, I think is definitely better than his I Have a Dream speech.
I think it is too.
10 times better.
I think it is too. And I think it demonstrates that Martin Luther King was thinking about all these issues
well before any one of us could even fathom it even coming to fruition.
He was talking about universal basic income. 1968, March, I think the date was March 10th, he gave the speech to the SCIU in New York. It could be the 12th, but in that time frame. And so he was talking about the fact that the black community is in a depression. And this is 1968. There was no depression going on across the country. Depression, if you look at the levels of unemployment in the black community, particularly among black males. we're in the same depression.
Same depression.
And so we need the political discourse needs to be around how do we infuse capital to communities so we can build a vibrant entrepreneurial system. And the work that you're doing around preparing people to have that wealthy mindset and preparing people to have the tools in the toolkit so they can go off and start a business, that's what's going to change the trajectory of our communities over the next 20 to 50 years.
Absolutely.
Because that creates jobs. We hire, black folks hire black folks and brown folks and white folks. They're in the communities where a lot of the retailers are leaving. And that's what's going to keep the dollar in our communities over an extended period of time so we can thrive. Anyway, I get passionate about this.
I think that's perfect because essentially you having that foresight and seeing that narrative within our community, my vision and the narrative I see within the community, that's how we came together.
That's exactly right.
We were essentially in the same lane, but we were just on opposite ends, and we eventually end up meeting in the middle of the track.
That's exactly
and
right.
So let's talk about Mochify.
Okay.
Yeah. So you leave banking, you have these high corporate positions, you're handling a lot of money.
Yep.
A lot of money.
A lot of money, but not enough.
Why Mochify?
Not enough black and brown money.
Definitely.
So I left in 2015.
Because people probably tried to tell you, you're going to leave that nice, cushy job and go and start some digital.
That's exactly what they said. But the only person who had to be supportive was my wife.
Right.
And she said, go do it.
Definitely.
So that was the nod that I needed. But what made me change tracks was the death of Michael Brown. And so I'll never forget when that happened, and I'm watching television, as we all were watching television, and watching the riots that were going on and the looting, and I thought, this feels a lot like an episode of Eyes on the Prize that I watched when I was a kid.
Okay.
And Eyes on the Prize, for people who don't know, it's one of the best documentaries, I would argue, ever done about the civil rights movement.
Okay.
It came out in the 80s. And it felt like in 2014, we were dealing with the same issues. Not much had changed since 1967, 68, when there were a series of riots after the death of Martin Luther King. And it just occurred to me that, here I am at JP Morgan, which is a great firm, great people. But I need to somehow use my skills to impact my community. And I'd much rather try and fail and have that as my legacy
1,000%.
than to sort of look back at my life and say, I saw a problem and I didn't try to fix it.
Because I can't leave my job to my kids.
Right.
They probably wouldn't want it.
I like that. I can't leave my job to my kids. Now,
ask me how I know.
But you can leave a corporation to your kids.
You definitely can leave a corporation.
You can leave an entrepreneurial venture to your kids. So with that, I said, let me leave and try to figure out how to be a part of the conversation. And so I went into the wilderness and I thought about I could buy a bank. I have enough experience so I could figure out how to get that done. I could
Hold on.
Yeah.
Buy a bank.
Buy a bank.
I like that.
That's a part of the wealth mindset.
But that's the thing I tell people is somebody may listen to you hear you say that and think you're crazy.
Right.
But how come we can't think on that level?
Right.
I can remember telling people that some of my first goals was to make, X amount of dollars.
Right.
And they're like, how's that going to happen? Because I believe it is going to happen.
Right.
And I think that's the mindset we have to take on, and that goes into creating that wealthy mindset.
Right.
I mean, I've talked to people who they can't even fathom making $5,000 a month. I'm trying to do $5,000 a day. And so just understanding that you have to have that different mindset. So when you said buying a bank, I wanted to just emphasize that we have to think on that level.
Right. And sometimes you got to put that crazy idea
out
there.
You have to.
And even just put it in the universe. That already just raises your gaze a little bit more. And you may not buy that bank.
You may not.
But you might have a big bank account.
Definitely.
So for me, it was like buy a bank. And one of the things that I was very focused on is there are a lot of and we hopefully will talk a little bit about this, but there are a lot of black banks that were struggling. And I wanted to help preserve and grow that. And I think actually we'll be able to do that on this platform. We can talk a little bit about that. So
Definitely.
anyway, I was thinking about buying a bank. I thought about raising a fund
Okay.
that would invest in companies that could help solve these issues. And then this goes to an important point that I know you talk about, which is having the right relationships and right mentors.
Correct.
So one of my mentors said to me, Wole, you have a lot of experience. He and I had worked together in some not-for-profit capacity. He said, you should start a company. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, I've invested in people who've got half the experience that you've got.
Wow.
Give it a try. And I said, okay. And so I went away and thought about what the model might be and the problem we wanted to solve. And people just responded and they said, you know what, I'll put a couple dollars with you as you try to get this off the ground. So I went to friends and family and asked them to invest in the vision. And the way I like to think about it is I went to folks and said, hey, I could use your money to start this company, but I don't want this money to ruin a friendship. So invest as much money as you feel comfortable with, but don't invest more that if it's not successful, you won't invite me over for Thanksgiving dinner.
Exactly.
Right? And so doing that, we were able to raise enough money as we went along to get the idea up and running and going and get product market fit and validation that we were on the right track. And then we went out and built the product. A lot of people today, I mean, it's so crazy, but a lot of people today, just on a piece of paper, can raise tens of millions of dollars. You know, we're just trying to get $50,000, $100,000
Right.
checks, right? And we've actually built more product capability with our friends and family cash because we were able to figure out how to make it work. And then we got product validation, and we just recently went out and were able to raise a couple $1 million from institutional investors who see the market opportunity. But the point of the story, though, is we had a vision that there's an opportunity to, with going back to your wealthy mindset idea, let's do something big and unscale.
Definitely.
Now our motto is think big, start small, scale quickly. But you got to have a big idea.
That's a T-shirt. That's a T-shirt.
It is a T-shirt, actually.
Right.
And so, but a big idea, people will get behind that and they'll write checks. So anyway, so that put me on a journey in 2016.
Okay.
And from there, we've just been methodically building a product, getting product validation, having conversations like this. And we feel now we're at a point where we feel good about the product. It works well. People tell us that it's helping them move forward. And we just want to encourage as many people to partner with us so we can help them down the journey. And where we're going is we want people, and this is why I'm really excited about our partnership, because I think, the work that you're doing all across the country in terms of helping people reach that next level. We want to do, I'll think of you as Gladys Knight and we're a Pip. We want to be a supporting cast with some of the tools that people need. So we're thinking about how do you just get the basic bank account? And for some folks, returning citizens, young people out of college, people who are moving from a homeless situation to
Definitely.
more stable situation, they need basic banking services.
Very basic.
So come to us and we'll get you started. From there, we want to go to the next level and say, okay, so you want to get that 700 or 750 credit score. Well, now you got the basics. Now we can start to take rent reporting. Maybe we'll even get to utility payments.
Correct.
Maybe we'll give you something called a secured credit card where you put some money down.
Correct.
And then you make payments against that. And we'll report that to the credit bureaus to even further enhance your credit score. So we want to do that. And then the third piece is, so you want to buy that first home, or you just want to move from a situation where you're renting, but you don't like the home that you're renting. A lot of places these days actually do screening. And they look at your credit score,
Yes.
if they're going to give you that next apartment, or to your point, you made it earlier, your low credit score may force you to put down a security deposit that's 2 or 3 times the size of what you ordinarily might have to put down. So we want to help people get that next apartment or that next home at the most reasonable cost. And the final thing is, how do we then, if someone aspires to, give you a stepping stone to being an entrepreneur.
Correct.
And so those are the 4 steps that if you operate on our platform, we want to move you through and prepare people for those kinds of things. What do we think complements the stuff that you're doing?
Absolutely. So would your product be for everyone?
Everybody.
And that's the thing that I like. It's not just targeting this demographic. And so anyone who is a fan of traditional banking, this could still be an option for them.
Exactly. And we allow people to link their bank accounts, and they can move money off of our platform to somebody else if
All
they
from
want
their cell phone.
for free, all from the cell phone. And then over time, our goal is to help people find low-cost lending products that they're eligible
That's
for.
very important.
In lieu of having to depend on the check cash or the pawn shop that's in your neighborhood.
Correct.
And so that's where we want to go in terms of changing the entire game for people. And, you know, it's intimidating sometimes when you're with banks and you know they don't want you in there. We want you to come through, and we want to help you. And we've got coaches, we've got partnerships with you where people can use our platform, and we're going to make referrals to the services that you provide.
Correct.
We've got other services that people have access to, and the key for us, the principle that we live by is we don't want to rip people off. We don't want to exploit anybody because that's easy to do.
Because they're preying on people who already, one, they're intimidated, and two, they don't know any better.
That's exactly right.
Because we don't know what's going on. We just assume I can put my money here, they're trustworthy.
That's exactly right.
But we heard the big box conglomerates who are not being trustworthy.
Right.
And so just being able to, like you say, park your money somewhere safe and not be gouged with all of the junk fees is it's a huge, tremendous money saver. And a lot of people you may hear, because I've heard just the narrative of, oh, it's just a $40 overdraft fee. That $40 adds up
Quickly.
And we got to stop thinking like that and understanding that, okay, I'll go here just because it's a big branch name, but why not look at companies like a MLK where I don't have to keep $100 minimum in there? Because it may be a month where you don't have $100 in your account.
Right.
You know, statistically, what they say, 40% of Americans have less than $500 in a bank account in savings.
That's exactly right.
So can you imagine the insufficient fees that the bank is racking up, which is probably why it's $40 billion on average per year. So, I mean, it just all goes hand in hand. And so, I mean, I'm extremely excited about what you guys are bringing to the table on, you know, like I said, or like you mentioned, the collaboration that, you know, we're going to be discussing and moving forward.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, why would someone who is, you know, probably a little more savvy, they keep a decent idle balance, why would MLK be attractive for them?
Yeah, and it's not an either or kind of situation.
Okay.
And I think, you know, what we're finding, statistically, 55% of African Americans are unbanked or underbanked.
Wow.
And that's huge. 50% in the Hispanic community, 55% in the Black African American community, Black community. So if you're fully banked, I would suggest to you, when was the last time that somebody sat down with you and said, how does your credit score work when you walked into a bank branch? When was the last time somebody said, hey, you know, how do we think about budgeting?
What's interesting, a lot of the people in the banks don't know.
That's exactly right.
So that's why they're not asking the question.
That's a great point.
Which brings me back to your point, and not to cut you off, of why I love MLK. You guys are going to be providing a level of financial education, which I think that's where it starts. You know, I've yet to go in. Now, when I do go to a bank, it's typically because I'm going to sit down with the banker.
Right.
Because there's a specific task I need that can't be completed online.
Exactly.
They've never sat down with me and said, okay, Will, what other ways can we service you?
Correct.
We're looking at your banking behavior. We looked at your credit scores. Maybe this product is good for you. Let's talk about other budgeting opportunities. A lot of times they're asking me questions about, oh, well, what do you do? And how did you get this in your account? Like, it's like, okay, do I work here or do you work? And so that's the thing that I really love about MLK is the financial education piece. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we provide is a couple of things. One, we have videos within our app that provide financial literacy.
Wow.
We have courses that we provide to individuals, the self courses that they can go through. We have blogs that talks about sort of the ideas of the day or the week or whatever to keep people up to date about ideas. And then we have partnerships like the partnership with you, where someone needs more one-on-one interaction and coaching, and we can make the right referral to the right individual organization like yours and others, where you can have more of that one-on-one collaboration coaching. We do a little bit of coaching, and we provide that to people. But sometimes you need a little bit more,
Right.
And that's where we have great partners like yourself.
Definitely.
And people have different objectives. I want to improve my credit score. Got it. Let me help you with that. Got some individuals who want to buy that first house. Got it. We have some resources to help you do that. And ultimately, we are establishing relationships with banks where we are vetting the right products for individuals, and then we will make recommendations to people.
Right.
Say, okay, now you need this credit card, you want this mortgage. Did you know, and I know you know this, there are a lot of programs outstanding for people if you are a first-time home buyer.
A plethora of programs.
Yeah.
And the thing I tell people is that, and this is also a disservice because, and this is why it's so important that you're vetting out who you're entrusting to go through the process with.
Yeah.
They won't tell you unless you ask.
That's exactly
because sometimes it may cut into their bottom line because they may not get as high as a commission. And so this is why we have to be educated before we go into the process. And that's what I love about what you do, what our company is aligned with. We have to become educated. And I always say that not the only, but one of the things that separates the wealthy from the unwealthy is information.
Right.
We have to get informed.
Right.
And when we have that information, we can go and understand, oh, wow, they have a no money down program.
Exactly.
And I don't have to be a first-time home buyer.
That's exactly
I just have to not own a home right now. And
Great
so
point.
we got to start to understand those things.
That's exactly right. And there are all these different programs. The federal government has dollars available.
That they have to give away.
They have to give away.
They have to.
And banks have a lot of incentive as well.
They do.
There's something called the CRA. We call it the Community Reinvestment Act, which came about in the 1970s, which forced banks to do business with everyone in the community, not just the wealthiest in the community. And the federal government holds banks to task in terms of how well they're doing.
Correct me if I'm wrong. They actually get audited if they
do.
don't disperse a certain amount of funds, residentially and, for small business. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. And not only do they get audited, they get scored.
Wow.
And so there's a grading system. And like anybody, banks don't want to have a poor grade.
At all
on this topic. And historically, it continues. If you have a poor grade, it will limit your ability as a bank to open new branches, close branches, and do acquisitions. So they pay attention to it. And increasingly, banks use it as a good housekeeping seal of approval.
Wow.
So they want a higher grade because it demonstrates their commitment to the community. But because of that, banks have lots of programs, but to your point, may not know about them, where they need to put dollars to work and they'll pay for closing costs, or they'll pay for I guess it's a part of closing costs, but title searches and things like that. So, or they may have lower interest loans on mortgages. So anyway, your point is 100% right that the difference between someone who's well educated about certain things in terms of, and it's not an intelligence thing,
right?
It's just access to information,
literally basic information. If we think about it,
100%. That can save you hundreds of thousands, tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we believe, as you believe, that if you help people and you educate people, that's going to come back to you
100%
in so many ways that you can't even imagine.
100%. And the thing I love about, our visions is that the foundation of all of that it starts with credit.
Yeah.
This is why I tell people credit is so much bigger than just wanting to buy a house, a car, getting a credit card.
Right.
It's going to save you.
Yes.
Getting that next job.
Yes.
Getting that better job.
Yes.
Preventing you from losing your job. I've known people who've worked in the public and private sector who's actually lost their job because their credit got ruined. And when they go to do their next evaluation, or someone who is working with the government who has to have a certain level of security clearance.
Right.
I had a client who could not get that next level of security clearance until he fixed his credit.
Right.
we don't think about these things because we've been taught to look at credit solely just to get a credit card to go shopping and buy gifts and all these things. It's so much bigger than that.
And to that point, and it again, you may have a lot of money in your bank account. You can't use that as a
At all.
proxy of understanding and of information. So, a friend of mine was thinking about becoming a part of something, and they looked at his credit score, and he hadn't really looked at his credit score. He met all the criteria financially. He pulled up his credit score and was like, "Your credit score is pretty poor."
Right.
And he works at a big company, a name brand company that we would all know, and it
You
turned
want to say
out
what it rhymes with?
no.
Okay.
It turned out that he had his medical bills
Wow.
associated with something that his father had done has shown up on his credit, right? And so they said, we're not able to promote you at this stage.
So missed
until
out
what
on
you-
opportunity.
Missed
due to
out on
credit.
opportunity because of your credit score. And it was a family member. So sometimes, you got a family member's behavior
Yeah,
that's
that can
messing up
impact
your
you.
credit score. And so it's important. I think rule number one, to your point, you got to know what it is.
Just even knowing how to find your credit score
Completely.
reports. We take for granted because that's second nature to us. But I talk to people who don't even know where to start to pull their
Right.
credit from.
Right.
And we have to change that.
Right.
Like, we shouldn't know the lyrics to our favorite song more than we know the importance of our credit score.
I agree with that.
So-
I agree with that. Well, that's why. So within the Mochify ecosystem, if you download the app, we'll give you your Vantage score for free.
Wow.
And it shows up within a couple of moments of answering a couple of questions. And from there, we want you to use our platform.
Correct.
And you can watch it increase over time. And, partnering with you, can people want to get really deep into it and figure
Correct.
out how they can improve it and other strategies? We can do that. But, you don't know that you got a problem until you understand,
Absolutely.
what the facts are. And quite frankly, having a poor credit score is nothing to be embarrassed about.
At all.
It's just something you've got to address. And the more information, to your point, you have about what makes up a credit score, different behaviors,
Right.
you're not destined to stay.
It
in that
doesn't
place.
stay with you forever like
No.
student loans.
No.
You can actually improve it.
Right.
And that's the thing I really try to get people to understand, because I think they get so embarrassed.
Right.
And I tell people, where you are financially has nothing to do with your credit profile.
Right.
I have clients who are, out of this world
Right.
financially
Right.
with some of the poorest credit scores.
Right.
And so it has nothing to do with where you are, what your talent is,
That's
any
exactly
of
right.
that. And so, I often say that credit can literally level the playing field
Yep.
somewhat,
Yep.
because I can walk into the same rooms as some of these corporate execs
Yep.
and get access to pretty much some of the same products they can just because of my credit score.
Oh.
I'm getting the cheaper money,
Yeah.
just like they are.
Yeah.
And then from a standpoint, and this is why I tell people your credit is important when dealing with investors.
Mhm.
You have angel capitalist investors
Right.
who will check their credit score
Right.
of the individual who's looking to borrow money.
Well, it's interesting. So yes, not only will they check your credit score, but they'll also check your social media. Which,
I believe it.
Which people say, I'm invest with you. Let me figure out who you are. But it also, when you're opening up new vendor relationships,
Mm-hmm.
so we've been fortunate enough where, we have a banking partner that cares about underserved communities, and that's why we
Correct.
decided to work with them. We're actually looking to partner with Black-owned banks and making our platform a source of distribution for assets for Black-owned banks. So
Right.
you're going to hear more about that in 2020 from us. But when you're talking to a new vendor, they say, we'd like to see your credit score. And if it doesn't meet a certain threshold,
They will not do business
they're not
with
going to
you
do business with
at
you.
all.
Even if you have the best idea in the
It
world.
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
No matter how much money you got put away,
Right.
that 3-digit number has prevented so many individuals to lose out on opportunities,
Correct.
which is why I say we have to get educated when it comes to credit.
And the thing about it is, the credit score is not a reflection of who you are
At
as
all.
a person.
At all.
You are, if you're a God-fearing person, take care of your family, responsible at home, all that stuff. You may have a low credit score, but don't let that low
At all.
credit score make you feel you're less than who you are. It's just another thing you got to address, come up with strategies, and move on.
Because it can always be repaired, no matter
Completely.
how disastrous it may have gotten at some point. Now, it may take some time,
Right.
but I always tell people that, if you did nothing,
Oh,
what is going to change
right.
during the lapse of the time
Right.
that you could have, put that time to better use.
Right.
And so I just tell people that, and again, the purpose of my book, Credit is King, is to even give people an understanding of how to maintain it. Because
Yes.
some of us, may get the good credit score, but then don't know how to maintain it or
Mhm.
what to even look for so that you can be proactive in repairing it or restoring it yourself.
Mhm.
I speak to so many people who think their credit is ruined. They just need to pay their credit card balance down.
Right.
And they have a $300 limit. They just max the card out,
Right.
not
Right.
knowing that their credit isn't horrible. You just
Right.
have to pay the balance down. And so something that we may take for granted because we
Right.
know the space and industry,
Right.
others may not, again, which is why I love forums like this
Right.
and, what Mochify is doing,
Right.
and then just being able to educate the communities on that.
Completely. And the communities, that community piece is really important. We spend a
Definitely.
lot of time, we've spent a lot of time with home healthcare workers.
Okay.
And we've been actually using technology to do webinars and to reach thousands of people, similar to some of the work that you're doing in the schools, which I'm
Definitely.
very impressed with and proud
Thank
of.
you.
We've been spending time with folks in Covenant House, for example,
Okay.
making sure that folks who are transitioning from an unstable housing situation can move into a stable housing situation. And one thing we didn't talk about is the importance of tax time, right? And that we're coming up on that. As soon as the calendar flips, we'll be thinking about taxes, and that's an important time when people there are refunds that people are eligible for, or the earned income tax credit everyone should take advantage of if they're eligible for that. They shouldn't take that money and get it the cash refund through a check casher.
The fees are
The fees are ridiculous. Find a bank account, download our account, get that bank account, provide that to somebody, and then think about using those dollars potentially as a way to start the journey to improving your
leverage
credit.
and invest and
Yeah.
improve. Because I'll tell people, restoring your credit is an investment,
Correct.
because
Yeah,
that's an
makes-
investment that will, I promise you, if you get the right tutelage,
Right.
can put you in a position to literally change your entire family trajectory.
Right.
And so I just think that it's important.
And the problem is, and we know that in our communities, being able to address intergenerational wealth is a fleeting thing.
Definitely.
The statistics are a little scary in terms of the folks who are born in the middle class have a very high percentage of falling out of the middle class as adults.
Wow.
So we have to really be thoughtful about all the stuff you're talking about to make sure that just because you've made it and you're having a family and they're in that situation,
Now you got to maintain it.
you got to maintain it. Right.
Inflation goes up, but the cost of the pay on jobs is not
Right.
increasing. So
No.
yeah, definitely.
And then giving people and making sure the young people have the mentality to figure out how to be entrepreneurs.
Definitely. Hey, goes back to the topic of this here is creating that wealthy mindset.
All about the
Definitely.
wealthy mindset.
Definitely.
And it's I think it's a multi-generational mindset. You got to take care of what's happening today,
100%.
but you also have to make an assessment that what I'm doing today is going to impact me tomorrow, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 25 years from now. And it's never too late to start making the right decisions.
Ever. Never too late. So, no, we definitely appreciate you coming on and explaining this. How can people find you? How can they find Mochify? When can they download the app? All that good stuff.
Thank you very much for that. This has been fabulous. So I really want to thank you again.
Oh, no, thank you.
So, so you can go we have a great website, www.mocafi.com.
I love the name, by the way.
Thank you
It
very
sounds
much.
cool. I was trying to think of a word. Like, it just sounds cool. I like it.
It's
almost sound like a drink.
It almost sounds like a drink.
Let me get that Mochify.
Let me get that Mochify. Mochify your life, baby. And we're also in the Apple Store and the Google Play Store and the Samsung Store.
Okay.
And you can just download the app.
Definitely.
And with, like I said, within 2 minutes of downloading the app, you can have a bank account. We actually have a service where you can, as soon as you enroll, and it's enrolling, and this is important, we don't look at how you've interacted with the banking system in the past.
Wow.
So there's this thing called the check system.
Yes, I was just about to ask. So will that prevent you from getting?
Not at all.
Wow.
All we need to know is you are who you say you are, and we can open up. We can
That's
enroll
huge.
you in an account.
That is huge.
Not even an application.
So it's a second chance
That's exactly
banking
right.
opportunity.
That's exactly
which is
right.
what we need.
And so as soon as you download and enroll in the account, you immediately get an account number and a routing number, and you can hit a button and we'll send you an email that has that information that you can then hand to your employer. You can hand to someone who's doing your taxes, and then your money can
So
start
direct
going,
deposit.
do direct deposit.
Wow.
So all that's there. So we're in the App Store, we're online, and we also have a very robust service infrastructure. So if you want to send us a note, talk to me. Any problem comes up, we are on it.
So customer service, all that.
All that.
That's what I'm talking
So
about.
because we believe customer intimacy is critical.
Okay.
You got to take care of your people, man.
You have to, because they're the ones that make sure we stay open.
100%.
Definitely.
100%.
So I need everybody, do me a favor, do yourself a favor. Look, I don't care where your financial journey is today, whether you have a bank account, whether you don't, whether you have 3 bank accounts. Look, I tell you, for all my entrepreneurs, you already know the game. You're going to have multiple bank accounts because it's about that banking relationship, just like Wole said. So I need everybody to do me a favor. Get out your phones right now. Download the app Mochify. I promise you, this company is going to be something that's going to revolutionize not only our community, but I think just in the banking industry, period, because I've yet to find a banking company or a banking partner that truly wants to educate us about understanding financial literacy, understanding how our money works, and not charge us a bunch of junk fees. So again, I appreciate you coming out.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. All right, guys. Again, this is Will Roundtree. Of course, you can follow me on all social media platforms at Mr. Will Roundtree. If you have not downloaded or subscribed to my YouTube, you're definitely doing yourself a disservice. But more importantly, it's all about Mochify. So again, do yourself a favor. I definitely have already downloaded it. So please make sure to go out, download it, share it, like it, tell all your friends and family. This should be the topic of discussion at all the barbecues, all the family reunions, all that good stuff. So again, family, this is Will Roundtree, and I'll see you at the top. Peace.